we live in a world where everything is supported by credit, and when credit breaks, everything breaks. And gold and silver are the only two currencies on the planet, only two monies on the planet that have no liability attached to them.
Your perspective, your opinion on should we have concern about being able to have access to our bank accounts or our brokerage accounts in the event of a reset?
Yeah, you should absolutely be concerned. At this point, this is no longer opinion. This is math. Mathematically, this system, the current system, cannot continue because there's too much debt. The debt that's out there now can never be repaid. And in order to repay it, they've got to create the capital for the interest. In other words, the interest doesn't exist to pay on the current debt. And it goes back to Richard Russell's inflate or die. They're going to have to continually inflate. And where we are right now with the Fed talking about tapering, that's pretty much laughable because the system has survived since 2008 on life support, if you will. And now they're talking about taking life support away. It'll be all over. Now, as far as your banks are concerned, your brokers are concerned, if you own stock, and myself and my partner Jim Sinclair have talked about this. Jim talked about this going all the way back to 2004, maybe 2005, that if you have stocks and you're not a trader, you should have those certificates issued to you. That way, if your broker goes bankrupt, it doesn't matter. You have your certificate. And if there's another broker that's still open and running, you can just go to another broker, deposit your securities, and sell them. I suspect for a spell, markets, banks, etc., are going to close. Whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, who knows? But it's a very real probability at this point that you're going to see markets close, because when they do lose control, of all markets, basically, what's the reaction going to be? I would suggest the reaction is going to be they pull the plug and they close markets. As a matter of fact, you just saw that happen today in Turkey. Their central bank has lost control of the currency. The currency is collapsing. Their market was down really hard last week. It opened down 5% today, and they closed it. So worrying about markets and banks closing, that's a very real concern. Now, as far as the banks are concerned, I typically don't keep much more than 6 months worth of bills in a bank. If I get a large inflow of money or a large check or whatever, my personal savings, I just buy junk silver. I buy junk silver, I have it stored. And obviously you have to have metal on hand, but I use junk silver as my savings because I know that I can't wake up tomorrow morning and find out my bank closed and the accounts have been bailed in. And if you look at FDIC legislation, the bail-ins are already, the laws are already written. They're already on the books. So this next time around, there will not be bailouts. There will be bail-ins. Well, the way the law is actually written, once you deposit, quote, deposit money with your bank, it's no longer your money. What you've done is you've lent the money to the bank. And the way the law reads, you are a creditor. So if your bank goes down, then you've got to get in line in bankruptcy court to get your portion back. And as I just mentioned, they're going to bail in rather than bail out. And if you want to see the roadmap for a bail-in, just go back to, I think it was 2013 or 14. Look at Cyprus. People went to bed on Friday night with 100 euros, and they woke up Monday morning and only had 30. So that was the test bail-in, and that was 7-8 years ago. If you can pay your mortgage off and you've locked in a rate of, 3%, 4%, 5%, I would be inclined not to pay the mortgage, but to hold metal alongside that. In other words, pretty much my whole life, I've owned enough gold and enough silver to pay off all my debt. And this goes back to when I was in my 20s. So it gave me comfort knowing that if the system did collapse, I would have the ability to pay my debt off in something that was not going to bankrupt if the entire system bankrupted.
People are really concerned, some more than others, about the potential for government, whether you call it confiscation or nationalization of their assets, including their financial assets like precious metals. Where do you stand on your view of the real risk of government nationalization or confiscation and what you believe are effective strategies to mitigate that risk?
I think it is a possibility. You've seen governments go down those lines, many times throughout history. Can they confiscate? Obviously, a bank bail-in, that's a way to confiscate. But can they go and get your brokerage account? Can they get your IRA or retirement accounts? With the IRA and retirement accounts, what they can do, and I would say if they do anything, this is the way they would do it, is that they would take your assets and then replace it with some type of bond, some type of monthly income that to start with looks good, but with the dollar being debased, a year or two later, it's like you lost your pension. So, that's a possibility. They did confiscate gold in 1933. Of course, they revalued it in 34 once the population did not have gold any longer. But if you're worried about confiscation of gold, what you should look at would be the pre-1933 Liberties and St. Gaudens. Those are considered collectibles. And I mean, you could have 1,000 ounces, 5,000 or coins, 0.9675. You could have, 5,000, 10,000, $20 gold pieces, and you should not legally be considered a hoarder. You'd be considered a coin collector because they are collectibles. I don't think though they would get to the point of confiscating silver because there's not enough silver, there's not enough monetary value to be had, and most more silver gets used than gets hoarded. So what happens is you're looking at it's an industrial metal, it's a medicinal, it's electronics, etc. So I don't really think that they'd be able to do it with silver, but they would try with if they're going to do that, they would try with gold. But in today's world, let's go back 2 years ago. If you talked 2 years ago about what's actually happening today, where they're talking about mandatory vaccines, you got to wear a mask, you got to stand 6 feet apart, blah, 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 you would have been called a stark raving mad lunatic, and people would have laughed at you. And now, what is it now? It's, quote, the new normal. I think this is going to come to a head. I think a lot of things are going to come to a head in this coming year.
Bill, what role do livestock play in your reset survival strategy? I love gold and silver, but they're not productive assets. What productive assets should we own? Livestock, land, tools, etc.
Well, yeah, obviously, living on a farm is going to be better than living in a condo in New York City. I mean, you want to live in a rural area. If you can farm yourself, if you can have chickens, goats, cattle, whatever hand tools, not necessarily electric tools. So you probably want to back up your whatever electric tools you have. If you use electric saw or chainsaw or whatever, it might be a good idea to get hand saws. If you've got to cut wood by hand instead of with gasoline or with electricity. One thing about land, people need to understand that the value of land, the value of property right now has its current value because it's been borrowed against. People have borrowed money to purchase properties, to purchase homesteads, to purchase houses. Once the credit market breaks, I believe you're going to see serious, I think you're going to see a real estate crash, but I think you're going to see serious softness even in farmland. So don't fool yourself and think, that if you're paying these inflated prices for farmland now, that they're going to be more inflated later. In dollar terms, maybe, but not in terms of gold, not in real terms. Right. You cannot eat gold. You can't eat silver. But if there's no money, if banks are closed, if the system has come down, I know more than where I live, I know more than a dozen farmers that will sell crops, livestock, you name it, for metal. So all of a sudden, metal will come back into the system from a barter standpoint. So even though you can't eat it, you can use it because farmers understand real money.
How much gold and silver is enough? People ask that all the time. I've heard many different answers.
I have recommended for years that families have one bag, which is $1,000 face, one bag of junk silver per person per household. So if you're a family of four, $4,000 face should be more than enough. If it's not enough, then we're living in Mad Max and it's not a world you probably would have even survived to that point. And I get that same question done again, how much should I put into gold and silver? And just for the last probably 2 or 3 years, my standard response now is whatever you don't want to lose. Because we live in a world where everything is supported by credit. And when credit breaks, everything breaks. And gold and silver are the only two currencies on the planet, only two monies on the planet that have no liability attached to them. They are pure asset money, and they're the only asset money on the planet. Everything else is a liability.